Welcome to the NCO Journal's Sergeant's Time podcast, a new series featuring informal conversations with leaders at all levels, where you'll have the unique chance to learn what makes them tick, what their leadership styles are, and what inspires them. I'm your host, Chago Zapata, managing editor of the NCO Journal, and with us is Sergeant First Class Osvaldo Equite, NCOIC of the NCO Journal, and Command Sergeant Major Jason Porras, Army University CSM. Today we welcome retired 12th Sergeant Major of the Army, Jack Tilley. Sergeant Major Tilley joined the Army in 1966 as an armored crewman. During his 36-year career, he held a variety of leadership positions in the Army, but primarily in the armor field. Currently, he is a successful management consultant, working with Fortune 500 companies on a number of projects and programs unique to the military community. He's also president and CEO of J. Tilley, Inc. It's an honor to have you on the show, Sergeant Major. Thank you for joining us. Okay, well, let's jump right in. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Sergeant Major. Tell us, what was life growing up like in Vancouver, Washington, and before you joined the Army? What was it like back then?
Well, first of all, I wasn't the best kid in the world. I was really probably a terrible kid. I hate to say this, but it's the truth. I wasn't really focused on school. Spent a little time in reform school. Spent about 8 months in reform school when I was a kid. After that, I went back to school, and I didn't have any problems after that. And then after I graduated, I remember sitting on a beach, and somebody asked me what I was going to do with my life, and I said, "Well, I don't really know." And so another guy asked me, said, "Well, do you want to go to college?" And I said, "Well, guys like me don't necessarily go to college." And then the second person said, "Hey, let's join the Army." And I said, "Okay, I'm in." And that's really why I joined the Army. So I was an okay kid. I got a little bit of trouble, but I wasn't the worst kid in the world. And I'll also tell you, when I joined the Army really changed my life, and we can talk about that later. So,
well, tell us about why you joined the Army. You said, well, you were with some buddies, right? I read that you joined the buddy program. Well, tell us a little bit about your friends and what kind of influenced you to join.
Well, I joined the Army. There was really 5 of us that was going to go in. It only ended up 2 of us going in the military. And from that period of time of my life, it was really, I think everybody needs change. You need to, if you want to grow a little bit, if you stay in one spot, you'll never grow. So me and Prentice Boykin was his name. We called him Barney, big guy. We both went in the Army, went in the 173rd Airborne, both went to Vietnam. I was there probably about a week and a half in the 173rd, and they had a big battle in the 1st Infantry Division. So they took every other person and sent them to the 1st Infantry Division. Of course, I was one of the every other. And at that time, you didn't have no email. You just write letters. So me and Barney would correspond back and forth. Unfortunately, he got killed in about the 11th month I was there. He got his stomach blown out, and he bled to death on the battlefield.
Sorry to hear about that, Sergeant Major. Let's talk about some of the projects that you're working on before we kind of move into some of these other things, other questions that we have. What are your big projects that you're working on? Better yet, actually, what are you doing? I mean, you're retired, so are you doing any fishing? Is it all work? What's going on with you, Sergeant Major?
Well, it's really funny. I tried to really slow down. In fact, at one time I've owned 3 companies. Let me back up just a little bit. When I first got out of the Army, I wanted to go back and help the Army as much as I could, but after 36 years, they really didn't need me anymore. So I sort of threw myself into work. And so I started doing a bunch of consulting work. I think at one time I had 9 or 10 clients. I was making really pretty good money doing that. And then I had to pay taxes, and I realized that, I better incorporate myself. So I opened up a little small company, and that led me up into a couple of other companies that had a little bit of ownership in. Now I only have one company. And then I started hiring veterans. I have about 10 veterans that work in my company. It's just a small company. We focus on education for our veterans, try to put them in school. That's really the focus. And the other thing I do now is I got a national show called Your Next Mission. We focus on trying to educate the country about the sacrifices of our military. Plus, we bring on senior leadership, not any political leaders yet, but a lot of different people that talk about the military. And I'm sure you do know, but this month is month of September is Suicide Prevention Month. So we brought a lot of people on to talk about suicide prevention. Again, since just to let you know, since 2001 to today, we've had 120,000 people, our veterans, commit suicide, and that bothers me. So there's a big push in our organization to do all we can to help our veterans and families as far as suicide and jobs too. That's the other thing we work on. We do about 4 or 5 hiring events a year. I think we put since we've been doing that, we put about 6,000 people to work. So I don't know if I'll ever quit working. I love working. I love dealing with people. I love talking to people. So I'm just I just keep moving along. I think if you sit in your butt and don't do anything, I think that's when you get in the process of just sort of waiting for somewhere to die. So I'm just going to keep moving until I just keel over, I guess.
It's interesting that you're working with the one of the things one of the subjects that we put on our writing prompts for the NCO Journal is suicide prevention. And I don't think the whole time that I've been managing editor, which is since 2015, I don't think we've ever had a single article submitted about suicide prevention. So hopefully this conversation with you might inspire some NCOs to go out there and write something, because I think it's something that's not it's not covered enough. I think it needs to be. It's something that's important, and that 120,000 soldiers or service members committing suicide is just astronomical, and we need to do something about it. So,
well, the thing about that is that like again, since 2001, one of the things I asked somebody the other day: do we track military family members? Do we track spouses? And the answer is no. And here's the other thing: is when we transition out of the military, it's a culture shock. Most people, and Sergeant Major, you can't attest to it yet, but the people that's got out of the service, there's an adjustment period that takes a while to work through. I'm not sure I've ever worked through it, but that's where that depression sets in. People not sure what they're going to do in their life. That's why I say when you get out, have a plan before you ever get out of the service. But go to work, start doing something. Don't sit on your backside and do anything. But I'll tell you another number which is sort of staggering. We had somebody on the show the other day that works with the criminal justice system out of D.C. And he told me that about 25% of the people that's incarcerated in our country are veterans, and that's about 180,000 people, which is another shocking number. So there's a lot of things that we need to do as far as helping people transition out of the military in preparation for that. Even myself, when I got out of the service, I transitioned okay, but maybe it's a little bit different for me. But I think a lot of people are just thrown out there and really have no direction or not sure what they're going to do. So it's something that we need to stay focused on and need to talk about just a little bit more too.
It's funny you brought that up about transitioning. Tomorrow I'm holding a leader professional development session with my NCOs, and I got a pretty senior population, most of them in their latter years in the Army. So we're going to go visit a local business where they talk to us about their operations, sales, maintenance, a whole bunch of different aspects within their business and how military skill sets could transfer over and, hopefully land them a job similar to what they have. The company's not important far as who they are, but it's the representation of what the skills that the NCOs bring to the outside community. Speaking of that, Sergeant Major, one of the questions we had here was, you have certainly inspired others during your active duty service time and even now afterwards. Can you share a little bit about who inspired you throughout your military career and afterwards, whether that be an NCO officer, a clergy member, or something of that nature?
I think all soldiers inspire me. I don't know what it is. I told you a little while ago when I came in the Army, it changed my life, and I've been very fortunate throughout my military career. Officers and non-commissioned officers, I can think of a few, Sergeant Major John Stevens, General Shinseki, a lot of different people that were great role models for me, not only as a senior NCO, but also as a junior NCO. I don't know. Maybe it's just the fact that I love people. I love working around people. I love trying to do the best I can. I think you're not on this earth very long. I mean, blink your eyes and you're gone, is what I always think about. But so I want to do all I can to help as many people as I can. until the day I die. And I'm inspired by just everything. A lot of people have a tendency to look at the bad things in life. And I think for myself, I look at the good things. I try to look at the good in people. And, everybody wants to do something good. And so I don't know. I think there's a lot of people out there. I probably wrong by not mentioning a whole bunch of names here, but I think everybody I get in contact with probably on a daily basis inspires me. But I do have a couple of my grandkids. I've got 4.5 great grandbabies now, and my grandkids really inspire me because they're so doggone smart. But I just enjoy life. Too many people look at the negative in life, and where you ought to be looking at the positive.
Sergeant Major, it sounds like, like what you just said, that you love people, that they inspire you. What's your earliest recollection of when you noticed this, that it was something that you were passionate about?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I came in the Army and I went basic AIT jump school and then went straight to Vietnam. And I think something happened in that period of time between EIT and war. I think war changes us all. I think when you go to war and you start seeing the things that go on in war, it changes you inside. I used to tell people, anybody that goes to war and sees those kind of things, or sees people hurt or killed in war, I think for a short period of time, hopefully for not ever, but I think your heart turns a little bit black when you go to war. So I think war had a tremendous impact on me. It really changed the way I looked at things a little bit differently. It made me appreciate life so much more. When I hear people, I listen to the news probably too much too, but I hear people on the news talking about all the bad things in life. But once you go out of this country and you go to another country or a third world country, and you come back, you realize how really good we have it here. So I just love life, and I'm going to, stay motivated, stay enthusiastic about things that are going on, and keep pushing and doing the best I can until I'm no longer here.
One of the things that we're hoping with this podcast, Sergeant Major, is to kind of reach some of the younger audience, and I think it's important that they know. And I guess in a way, history of some of the things that other NCOs have done. Would you be able to tell us maybe a short little story of an NCO who influenced and who influenced you as a leader? Maybe maybe this person might have been somebody who, in some way, mentored you or guided you in a direction, or made you want to be like him. Do you have any sort of little story you could tell us about an NCO that inspired you?
Again, my platoon sergeant, Sergeant Wilson. We used to call him Flip Wilson. I still stay in contact with him. He lives down in El Paso, Texas. But he's a guy that influenced me a great deal just by his leadership style and the way he treated people and the way that he led by example. Too many people always tell you what to do and they don't show you what to do. He was always the kind of guy that would show you or tell you what to do and be right next to you doing those kind of things with you. And he just was a great role model. And he was probably had a tremendous impact on me. And then a couple of my first battalion sergeant major was a guy named John Kearns, Sergeant Major Kearns. I remember I was a first sergeant, and I hated speaking in front of people. And he called me down to his office and said, "Hey, look, I want you to be a guest speaker over at the NCO Academy." And I said, "Sergeant Major, I really don't like speaking in front of people." He said, "I didn't ask you. You're going to be the guest speaker." And so I went back to my office. In fact, he didn't give me a speech. And I went back to my office and I asked the first sergeant next to me, I can't remember his name now. I said, "Hey, would you mind being the guest speaker over there?" And he said, "Oh, sure, I'll do it." So I went down there and I said, "Sergeant Major, first sergeant," again, I can't remember his name, said he'll be the guest speaker. And he says, "I didn't ask him. I asked you, and you're going to do it, and you're not going to give it to nobody else." And so for 2 months, I rehearsed this speech. And I got up there, and 2 months, and I think there was only about 15 people in the audience or something like that. And I had it memorized down to a T. And I gave that speech. And after that, I probably gave another 30 speeches in the next year. But guys like that force you to, I don't say force, but teach you to bring the best out of you. And he showed me that, there's nothing I can't do. If I want to do something, I can get it done. And I think sometimes people are worried about offending somebody or doing something wrong. My idea is, hey, you're never going to have 100% solution on anything. You may have an 80% solution, but get in there, get it done, and work on that 100%. But just do the best you can. And that's how I've looked at life. I'm going to do the best I can. Am I the smartest person in the world? Probably not. But you're going to get a guy that's going to get in there and work just as hard as he can to get the job done. So, again, John Stevens, Sergeant Major Kearns, and my platoon sergeant there really had a tremendous impact on me.
Thank you for that, Sergeant Major. Sharing everything you've shared so far, it makes me reflect on my upbringing and my story. And it's very similar. I probably wasn't the best kid. Joined the Army as a high school dropout. The Army changed me significantly. My question is, when did you know that you were going to make a career out of it? And when did you realize that you were going to be as successful as you were? For me, when I went to the recruiter and they said, hey, how long do you want to sign the enlistment contract? I said, I'll sign up for 20 years. I had no idea there was increments that you were allowed to do. I was just ready to sign up, make it a career right away. And I think right now we have soldiers reluctant to sign up, or we're having a difficult time meeting our mission for recruiting and then retaining those soldiers as well. And one of the advice I give soldiers is not to separate from the military before they have at least one reenlistment. Try something different. I don't want them, leaving the Army because they have, maybe they're trying to get away from their leader or their installation. Give it a shot. Go to at least 2 places. And then if it's not for them, I fully support them getting out. But I think they should always try something different and see what the Army actually is, get a better sight picture, and then make that decision. What are your thoughts on that, Sergeant Major?
Well, first of all, I stayed in the Army 3 years and 30 days. And I was a drill sergeant. I made staff sergeant in 2.5 years in the Army the first time in there. And I had a commander that wasn't the best leader in the world. And I probably didn't see eye to eye. And I was probably still growing a little bit. I was only, I think I was 20 years old or had turned 121 yet. And so he made me so angry, I got out of the service. And when I got out of the service, I stayed out about 2 years, and I realized all the time that I was out of the service, how much I loved the Army. And after about 2 years, I started, even in between that time, I'd go by the recruiting office. I was up at Washington State, and I'd go visit Fort Lewis, Washington, Joint Base Lewis McChord now, and visit, watch people train, and do all sorts of stuff. And I just missed something in the Army. And so after about 2 years, I went back to the recruiting office and started talking to them about coming back in. And then one day they called me up and says, hey, look, you got about 4 days to come back in before you lose all your rank. I'm going to lose my time and grade anyway. He said, you need to either come back in or just forget about it because you come back in as an E1. I was down there that day enlisted in the Army, doing my, get ready to take my test, do all the stuff I had to do. And so I never really planned on staying in the Army. It just sort of fell that way. I just liked what I was doing. I liked shooting tanks. Again, I've said it before, I like being around people, and I like that competitive spirit. I like competing against, whether or not we was going to run or do PT or shoot tank gunner or whatever it was. I always wanted to win at everything. And so I was pretty doggone competitive. And I never planned on staying in the Army as long as I did. In fact, somebody asked me one day, said, what do you want to be in the Army? I said, well, my goal in the Army when I came in the Army was to be a Spec 4. I never worried about making E5 or E6 or E7 or E8 or E9. And I never really wanted to be the sergeant major of the Army. I'm going to tell you that story real quick. I don't know if you knew him, but did you know Sergeant Major Strickland? He got killed in 9/11 in the Pentagon. You probably don't know him, but I was a CENTCOM Sergeant Major, and Sergeant Major Strickland called me, says, are you going to compete for the Sergeant Major of the Army? And I said, well, let some of these other guys do it. I was going to try to get a job with USAA. And he says, okay, I just want to check, and hung up, click. And then the next day, Sergeant Major of the Army Bob Hall called me. He says, "Hey, look, are you going to put your name in the slate for my job?" And I said, "Well, no, Sergeant Major, I hadn't planned on it." He said, "Well, I'd like you to." I said, "Well, the Army's been good to me. If you want me to put my name on the slate, I'll certainly do that." And so he said, "Well, don't worry." And I said, "What do you mean, don't worry?" He said, "Don't worry. They'll never hire your ass anyway." And so I was really, again, I think it's a good job to be the Sergeant Major of the Army. Was I the best person to be there? I'm not sure I was or I wasn't. But the Army, again, was good to me, and I wanted to give all I could back to the Army as much as I could, and until, like I said, until I'm no longer on this earth. So it's I've been really, really blessed in the Army. But again, I wasn't planning on staying. It just sort of fell that way. I think, let me say one more thing too. I think when I was growing up in the military too, we talked so much with each other. I think through social media and the iPhone and all this stuff, I think people don't talk and listen to each other enough nowadays, and we don't know enough about our soldiers. And I think that's a downfall. I think what you ought to do is maybe twice a week. Maybe you're doing that now and I don't know it, but maybe a couple times a week, put your iPhone down and make soldiers talk to each other and tell each other about, what they're doing and what their issues are, what their families are doing. But we need to talk a little bit more. And you said something about recruiting. One of the things that I think we have a problem about recruiting is nobody knows about the military. Nobody knows about the Army. We don't say enough about the Army. We don't tell our stories. We don't tell people about the kind of sacrifices that so few make for us to live the life we have today. And we need to get out there and tell more about what's going on with our senior officers and senior non-commissioned officers. About 82% of the force is enlisted, and we don't get a whole lot of enlisted guys are out there. Yeah, maybe a few nowadays, but not as many as that we should have, that get out and tell their stories about what they've done, what they've seen, and what accomplishments they've had in the military.
Sergeant Major, you mentioned telling our story and probably talking about the sacrifices that that are made every day. But I think part of that story also should be how the Army has really helped a lot of people. Because hearing from both of you, Sergeant Major and Sergeant Major Porras here, talking about how the Army really changed your lives, that's the kind of stories that I'd like to hear. Maybe you can give us an example of how the Army changed you, maybe becoming a leader, helping you become a leader, or maybe giving you purpose.
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, the Army. It's hard to say how it changed you, because when you talk about how the Army changed you, it's the Army, but it's the people around you that change you. It's the leaders that you have. It's the missions you go on. It's the things that you see. It's the good things and the bad things that you see throughout your time in the military, and that's what changes you inside. Again, most people that live in this country have television because they only see from where they're standing at. They don't really grow. When you go into the Army, you see more of life than the majority of people in this country. I mean, in my time, even as a Sergeant Major of the Army, the last 3.5 years in the Army, I traveled 800,000 miles. I've seen people all over the world, and I've seen a lot of, like I said, a lot of good things, a lot of bad things maybe too. But even growing up, I was a division sergeant major for 5.5 years, deployed all the time. So just the people that you're around, the things that you see, and the countries that you go to is just so rewarding, and it just changing inside. And I've been blessed, like I said, blessed to serve in the military, and blessed to do all I can to help the military forever and ever.
Hey, Sergeant Major, I'd like to kind of switch it up a little bit. I think it's important to give our audience here a kind of a teaching moment. Can you tell us a little about a time when you failed and how you moved past that and grew from the experience?
I've never failed. I think probably I don't know if I'd like to say I'd failed at anything. I haven't been 100% of some stuff, maybe 80%, like I was saying before. And there's things that I wish once they're accomplished, I could have did a little bit better. I know in shooting tank gunnery, I always wanted to be the best shot and everybody, and realized that I couldn't outshoot everybody all the time, even though I did it a couple times anyway. I don't know if I don't know if I've ever failed, to tell you the truth. And maybe that's a little brazen there a little bit, but there's things I did I wish I could have did a little bit better. When I was a sergeant major in the Army, I worked on pay and quality of life and stuff, and got a pretty good pay raise. Did I fail because I didn't get more money? Probably not. At least I pushed that rock down the road a little bit farther. And I think that's what we do as non-commissioned officers. You're never going to fail. You're just going to be unhappy about maybe what you accomplished. Maybe it could have been a little bit better. I don't know if you play golf or not. Every time I play golf, I always say I could have shot a better score. And every day in the Army, when I did anything, I said, man, I could have made it a little bit better. Every deployment that I ever went on, I did a little bit better to help the people that I was around. Every unit that I was ever in could have been a little bit better. And probably the answer is yes. But you have to do your part as a non-commissioned officer to push that rock down the road, to make it better for the next person behind it. I always like to tell people that the word sergeant in French, I know you know what it means to serve. And to be a good non-commissioned officer, you got to serve the people above you and below you. And I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that, it's not just about me. It's about the people that I'm working with below me and above me, to make them better officers and better soldiers that I'm working with each and every day.
Sergeant Major, I think I think when you said you've never failed at anything, I don't look at that as a brag or anything. I think that's a mentality, and it goes back to you thinking about how, you focus on the positive, and I think you're spot on. I think there's a lot of things that we don't get exactly our way, and you can choose to look at it as a failure, or you can choose to look at it as, it didn't quite get to what you're looking at, but definitely didn't fail. I don't like using failure either, although I have failed at a couple of things, unfortunately. I got a question for you, and my question would be, for soldiers, looking for inspiration in their career right now, and they say, hey, from a man who went from private up to sergeant major of the Army, what was the most rewarding position? Like for me, I tell people I think first sergeant was the most rewarding position I was in, and then probably second would be being a sergeant first class. Platoon sergeant was great, and then probably third would be sergeant major. What are your thoughts on that, and what should they be? Of course, they should be inspired to achieve the best they can, but maybe shorter marks or easily or quickly achievable rather than SMA. Of course, they want to get there, but if they're not, what can they look forward to at the platoon sergeant, first sergeant level, in your opinion?
Well, I think one of the best jobs I ever had in my military career was being a platoon sergeant. I love being a platoon sergeant because you had control of a small group of people that you could, work real hard. They just to get the best out of them. I love being a first sergeant. I was a first sergeant about 3 different times, a couple different units in the States and then in Korea, and that was a great job. But it was, but I think what happens is as you develop in the military, you can be a good platoon sergeant, but you have so much. I hope I had so much to offer and wanted to do so much more. I wanted to be a first sergeant, but I wasn't just focused on being a first sergeant. I think sometimes we're so worried about the next step, we don't do a very good job at the step we're standing on, if that makes sense. I've talked to people before, says, I'm going to be a first sergeant, I'm going to be a sergeant major, and they're a staff sergeant. Well, be a good staff sergeant, and that'll come to you. I never ever thought I'd make first sergeant. I never thought I'd be a first sergeant, and I did the best I could as a first sergeant. And I was shocked when the Army, with the military, selected me to sergeant major. But I wanted to be the best sergeant major that I could be at my level. And so I'm telling you that because I think sometimes people are so worried about the next step, they're not very good at the step that they're standing on. So stay focused on your lane of responsibility. I remember when I was a young soldier, I used to talk to people, and they'd talk about D company and C company and all the rest of the companies. And they was worried about what they was doing. And I never did that. I always said, nah, they're doing a good job or bad job. I don't care. I'm going to do the best job in my lane of responsibility. And I'm not going to worry about anything. I'm sure they don't use this word anymore, but soldiers know if you're real or you're Memorex, is what I used to say. And really the answer is soldiers know if if they're going to trust you or they're going to believe in you. And if they believe in you and you do the best job you can accomplish anything. But if they don't believe in you and they don't think that you care about, about them and their families, you're just there just doing a job. So you got to stay focused, and you got to know that they got to know that you care. I all the time I was in the military, it was people say there's 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, but it was like that for me. On Saturdays and Sundays, I go in and check on soldiers, and if somebody was at 5 o'clock or whatever, I wouldn't go home. I'd stay around, talk to soldiers, but I knew a lot about them, and I knew how they was feeling. I could read them, and if they're having a bad day, I could try to go in, pick them up a little bit. And one other thing, and I'll sort of be quiet because I'm rambling on here a little bit, is there's a lot to be said about leading by example. People are watching you all the time, what you do good and what you do bad. And and enforcing basic standards. If you walk by somebody that's not doing something correct and you don't say anything to them, you've established a new standard. So enforce those standards, lead by example, and be a good listener and a good communicator. And I think you can be successful in the military.
That's awesome, Sergeant Major. And I know earlier you shared the story about being tasked as a first sergeant to give a graduation speech. So my question is kind of tied into that. Before I came here, I was lucky enough to be the commandant up in Jay-Bear, Alaska, the 11th Airborne NCOA commandant. And we had graduations, and I'll tell you that inspired me every single cycle that they graduated, typically about once a month. And if you could go back and give a graduation speech today, what would you tell that new sergeant that's getting ready to graduate before they go back to their formation?
I'd probably say what you've learned in the school, in PLDC or your basic or advanced courses, go back and use it in your unit. All this stuff is not, it's not for you to keep to yourself. It's to share with the soldiers and leaders that you're going to work with. Too often we go back and say, that's just something I had to do, and I punched my ticket, I'm going to move out. Go back and use what they've taught you. And I think that's probably the most important. Too many people forget about that. And I'm glad you brought up about schools. The other thing I think is important about schools is military education is important, but don't forget about your civilian education. We talked a little bit about transitioning out of the military. You need to start thinking, what are you going to do when you get out of the service? So one of those things that you need to do is either get you a 4-year, a bachelor's, a master's, or a doctorate, whatever you want to do, or get certified in something. So when you transition out of the military, that you're ready to make that next step into the civilian market. And let me throw one more thing in there too. Everybody should have about 3 mentors. If you're struggling, you want to talk to somebody, you want to bounce some ideas off them, have a couple of mentors that you can reach to. I always used to say, a couple on active duty and one is a retiree, or maybe a couple of retirees. How many mentors do you think I had when I was a sergeant major of the Army? I'll tell you, I had probably one of the MACOMs I used to bounce ideas off, but my spouse, my wife, I talked to her about a lot of issues because, she knows me and she knows how I feel about things. And she was a pretty good coach for me when I was growing up in the military.
Sergeant Major, that's a great point. If I can, since you brought up your spouse, can you talk about the importance that family plays in a soldier's career and how significant of a role she played? I'm sure, you look at her and she was, while you were sitting in SMA, she was, very much right there along your side the entire way. So what role did she play and how significant was she in your path and journey in the military?
Oh, she was everything to me. My I've been married now over 50 years. And, I tell people all the time, all the PCSs I had, I'd always go first. She'd move all the household goods, everything in our kids. She took care of everything in the military. I don't know if I could have even been I'm not going to judge myself, but the things I was able to accomplish in the military was because of my wife, because of my spouse and my kids. One of the things that I look back on now is I wish I'd have spent a little bit more time with my kids because, to be honest with you, I was always focused on the military and they grew up so quick that I couldn't appreciate, because I wasn't around, I was always gone. I didn't have the opportunity to appreciate all the things they did when they was growing up. And so that was a downfall. But my wife did absolutely everything. Uh, and she was just a good person. And she never said anything. She never complained about anything. She just got the job done. In fact, I'll tell you, it's not a funny story, but sort of it's a story. I went to the Sergeant Major's Academy, and while I was down there, I was talking to my company commander. He says, "Hey, how's your wife?" And I said, "What do you mean, how's my wife? She's fine." "Oh, she had a wreck. Did you know that?" I said, "No, I did not know that." And so I call her up. I says, "Gloria, did you have a wreck?" "Yeah, I had a wreck." I said, "Well, it was everything okay?" "Well, yeah, it was okay." And she didn't really elaborate much. I was trying to pull it out of her. And what happened was it was at Fort Knox there. It was real icy, and she stopped to help somebody. Or no, her car broke down. Take it back. Her car broke down, and somebody stopped to help her. And when they got out, the person that was trying to help her got hit by a car. And so it was just a heck of a mess right there. But she never said anything about it. She just got the job done. So spouses are. If you want to have a good military career, keep your wife involved with the process. Let them be part of that process. They do so much, and a lot of times I think now that we just don't say enough about all the accomplishments our spouses do for all of us.
That's interesting. My wife, while I was in recruiter school, my wife was I was in the middle of school, and my wife was getting ready to give birth to our second child, and it's yeah, I mean. She just the kind of sacrifices that the spouses make is it can't be overblown, not at all, because she never spoke and never she didn't want to disturb me while I was in the middle of the school, because it was you know, it was very intense. Excuse me, intense. And it was I'm just awed by how much she put up with, and the sacrifices that she made for me in my career. So it's you know, I'm just right there with you, Sergeant Major. I think it's you know, our spouses, our families play such a huge role in our lives, and I know I couldn't have made it through my career without any of them, but more specifically my wife. So
Yeah, well, yeah. When I retired, I told my wife, I said, you know, for the rest of my life, whatever you want to do, you can do. Wherever you want to go, you can go. Whatever you want to buy, you can buy. And I'll just work and make sure you're taken care of. But you know, I owe you so much, and I want to give back. And I think one of the things, going back to transition, is that when you start transitioning out of the military, you need to make sure that your spouse is involved with that process. And because, you know, you got to make decisions together, not individually. You got to make decisions that impact both of you. I don't know what the number is, but I know a lot of people, when they get out of the service after so many years, they separate. And I think they separate because they just don't talk to each other, and there's such a big change in their life that maybe they blame it on their spouse or something. But that's stuff. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't think I'd have got anything accomplished in my life if it wasn't for my spouse, my family.
I want to change it up a little bit here, Sergeant Major. I have a question about because I read a little something here. I was reading. You have quite a few bios out there, by the way, and in one of them, it mentioned.
Too many.
Well, I don't know, but in one of them, there was a mention of you. You were driving on 9/11. You were driving somewhere, and you told your driver to turn around and go back after the plane crashed into the Pentagon. Could you tell us about that day? Would you be okay telling us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah. Well, what had happened was I was up at Fort Myer, and I was speaking to some lawyers, and I was getting ready to go speak at a boss's program. And when I was coming down the hill by Fort Myer, the plane actually hit, and so I told the driver just to go to the Pentagon. It was sort of funny. When I got to the Pentagon, you know, people were running everywhere, and I ran up to the guard at the gate, and he said, "Well, you can't go in there." And I just ran past him up to make sure everything was okay in my office, and people had already evacuated out. And then I went around to the front of where the plane had actually hit, the side of the building, and I was standing there for a second, and they thought another plane was coming, and then people started running again. And I ran again. I ran to like a road, and I thought, geez, if a plane hit me individually, I guess that'd be a miracle. So I just sort of hunkered down, stood right there for a minute, and then for the next few days, I stayed right there next to the Pentagon, and and did all we could to assist the people that were in the Pentagon. But it was just terrible. In fact, one of the things, myself and General Van Alstyne, when the dust had sort of settled and the fire was still burning, we actually went back into the Pentagon and tried to go as far as we could. It was still burning, and we went back. I don't know how far we went back, but I finally told him, I said, "Hey, look, sir, if we go any farther, we'll be casualties." So we just turned around and came back out. It was just terrible. And when you think about that, you think about somebody, I can't remember the actual numbers. It's been a long time ago, but it was over 180 people that were killed that day. And Sergeant Major Strickland and Sergeant Major Ivory both were friends of mine, and General Maud. Sergeant Major Strickland didn't have to be there. He was on transition leave, and he came back to the Pentagon to help General Maud with a meeting. And he was right there in the impact area where the plane hit. And so again, that was a day that probably pulled our country closer together than any other time. I wish people wouldn't forget about it, because I always worry about the fact that, I don't want to get into anything else but the military, but I worry about the fact that who we're letting in our country, and we don't know who we're letting in our country. And I worry about the fact that another 9/11 could happen, even worse this time. So that's another day that it really had a tremendous impact on my life. And really, if you think about it, simply by the grace of God, I mean, I could have been in a different location than the Pentagon. I could have gotten hurt, but I've been really lucky, I guess. But even in Vietnam, I was overran, 20 wounded and 7 killed. And I guess when God calls you, you're going to go. But I've been real fortunate throughout my military career. But that was a terrible day for our country.
Yeah, it was definitely a day to remember, and a lot of us are. I would hazard to say that the majority of a country, especially the military, I think remembers that day. I remember where I was on that day. I was recruiting, by the way, but I remember that day, and I remember, and I was. By the way, Sergeant Major, I'm a former Marine, so apologies for that. Hoorah! But I was. It was something that. That transition from peacetime to wartime is something you've gone through several times. Although we just made the transition from war to peace. Can you tell us a little bit about the that transition to the global war on terrorism, and what stands out to you most from those days?
I think that one thing that stands out was it made us angry. I mean, at one point in a time of our life, our whole country pulled together, and it just made everybody in this country angry. And I think the one thing that sticks out of me is that we wanted to pay them back. We wanted to get them. We didn't want to shake hands with them either. We wanted to do what we had to do to make sure that they paid for what they did to us. I think the other thing that it's sort of funny. I remember when we all got back in there, and we got back to the Pentagon, and we're working and stuff. And I told General Saseki, I need to go to the desert and see what's going on. He says, "No, Sergeant Major, don't go. That you disrupt too many people over there." And then the next day, he said, "Hey, Sergeant Major, I want." He asked me a question about Saudi or something. I said, "Sir, I don't know what's going on. I need to go over there." And he said, "Yeah, go." So I went over there. I think the one thing about that is that we did what the country asked us to do. And it just was a terrible time for us. And the war on terrorism, it damaged so many people. It hurt so many people. I mean, Afghanistan and how we came out of Afghanistan. So, somebody asked me on a podcast not too long ago, so, that the military really sort of screwed up coming out of Afghanistan. I said, don't blame that on the military. The military, everybody has a squad leader. And so I'll tell you how it works. The Pentagon gives options to the State Department, to the President of the United States, and they give them about 2 or 3 options or whatever. And then they decide what we do, what course of action we take. we have the best military in the world, and they do what our political leadership asked them to do. And so, that war on terrorism lasted a long time. What bothers me about that, though, more than anything else, is we need to make sure we don't take our eye off the bubble here a little bit. I talked about the southern border just a little bit. We have so many people coming to our country. The last number I've heard now was about 150 suspected terrorists had come into our country. So if there's 150, that means that maybe another 300 or 400 got through. We don't know they're here. And if we really start digging, it'd be an interesting number to see exactly how many people in this country there have ties to people who just absolutely hate our country. The other thing it is sort of a problem is, especially in the war on terrorism, is sometimes our political leadership forget about and don't know much about war, but just forget about the what war is like and what we have to do to make sure that we're safe and secure. And I think we're missing the bubble a little bit on that. And you can't blame that on any soldiers. You blame that on leadership making decisions. And I'm not second guessing anybody. I mean, people have to make decisions based on the information they get, but I'm certainly concerned about the direction that we're going as far as securing our country and just coming out of Afghanistan.
Sergeant Major, one of your successes was you helped establish a more mobile and quicker response force for the Army during your tenure. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what that took, because like you said, the Army was ready to respond to the nation's call, and that's exactly what the Army was at that point. We were ready. We were ready to go, ready to accomplish whatever needed to be done, and we did that extremely well. So I think maybe you can talk a little bit about how the Army was prepared to do that, and maybe what the NCO's role is in that.
Well, it goes back to what we've been doing all our military career. We have quick reactionary organizations within our, whether or not they're special ops or 82nd, 101st, or our First Army, whatever it needs. How that system works is all that information comes back into the maybe into CENTCOM, or depending on what the area of operation is, and they ask us for whatever slice we need. So we have reactionary forces now that can get on the ground within 96 hours, and that's really what we focus about. It's about making sure we get people on the ground to secure whatever the area that we needed in. So that's what our focus has been for ever and ever and ever. Hopefully that answered your question there.
No, yeah, and then if you could just maybe talk a little bit about the, down at the tactical level as the NCOs, what is their roles in probably in the garrison environment?
Well, one of the things that I hear a lot of, it's teaching people how to fight. Let's be honest about one thing. When you raise your hand, say, I will protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, that means that you're willing to die for the freedoms of this country. And so when you're talking about training soldiers and making sure that they're ready to go to war, you need to make sure that you focus on the basic fundamentals of being a soldier, making sure that they know their skills. There's just no second best in our profession. Either you're the best or you're going to pay with it with your life if you're not. And so at the bottom level, at the squad leader, platoon sergeant, or even a company, you have to make sure that you drill. I used to call them battle drills. Maybe they still call them that. But you drill people to make sure they know exactly what to do based on what the situation is. So it's all about training, hard, realistic training. When I was a division sergeant major, when I first got there, we used to qualify with the M16 or with their weapon systems without wearing body armor. And I asked him, I said, why aren't you wearing body armor? He said, well, it's too hard for them to qualify with a weapon with that body armor. And I said, hell, if you go to war, you're going to take it off to shoot at the enemy? No. Well, then put it on and train. And everybody complained about their scores. Well, 6 months later, the scores come back up because they figured out how to do it. And so you just need to train the way you're going to fight. You got to make sure that, if you're a platoon sergeant, that you're not cutting corners. You're training, you're doing the best you can to make sure people are ready to go to war. People ask me sometimes, when do you think the next war is going to be? I tell them all the time that we'll have another war within the next 5 to 10 years. That guarantee. And the Army will be in the middle of it too. The Army is the biggest service. I used to say 1.3 million people. And we always take the biggest impact on it because we have the people that are ground fighting forces. but we need to make sure that we're not cutting corners, that we're training, and we're making sure that the soldiers that we're ready to go, that are ready to fight. The other thing is, that's why when you're a senior leader, an NCO, a staff sergeant, a starting E5, making sure that you train that specialist and that PFC, because in war, that PFC could be the platoon sergeant, or that specialist could be the platoon sergeant. So you got to make sure that you train those people to do what you got to do in a combat situation.
Is there anything we didn't ask you that you would like to share to get across for the NCOs that are going to view this podcast?
Well, I think the one thing that I'd say is that it's the NCO core. You're not by yourself as an individual. Never think that you're trying to get anything accomplished by yourself. So work as a team. This is a team sport. Nobody in the military is successful by themselves. It's all about working as a team and functioning as a team to get the best out of each individual. And really, as a leader, my job is to train the people below me, make sure they're ready to take that next step up. And I think sometimes, again, don't worry so much about your advancement. Make sure that you're training the people below you and you're working with the people above you. So I love the Army. And I think the other thing I'd tell you too is look at the good in life. Make sure that you understand that you're a leader and what your responsibilities are. I want to say one more thing. I always tell people the story. I have an older son that had pneumococcal meningitis, left him temporarily blind and temporarily deaf, had 20 to 30 convulsions a day. And I always thought he had died probably at the age of 6 or 7. Well, now he's over 50 years old and he's still kicking. He can hear out of his left ear only, and he can see, and he's probably mentally about 12 or 13 years old. But the thing about that is that he's a great human being, and he did a lot. He's did a lot and accomplished a lot in his life. And so I remember one time, that story I'll tell you. I remember one time I was up at Joint Base Lewis McChord, and he got real sick. And I thought he was going to die. And he was only about 4 years old. I remember going to the hospital and asking the doctor, I said, "Hey, doc, what's going to happen? Do you know?" And he said, "I don't know." Now, at the time, he was having the seizures, having all these problems with him. And so I went into the small chapel and I got on my hands and knees. And I said, "God, either let him live or let him die." And the next day, there wasn't nothing wrong with him. His seizures had stopped, and he was like on 4 different kinds of medication. They put him on 2, I think it was. And so everybody that goes to war gets closer to God. Never forget that, there is a higher being, and you need to make sure that, that you believe in life, you believe in God, and you believe in your family. And most of all, you believe in this great country each and every day.
Sergeant Major, I have one final thing to ask, and this is how we're ending all our podcast here. The final question is, what advice would present-day you have newly promoted Sergeant Tilley back in the day?
Do your job. Well, the thing about it is be the best that you could be. When I was at Sergeant 5, when I was a tanker, I wanted to be the best tanker in the world. I wanted to know everything about this tanking system. I wanted to know how to shoot better than everybody else. And so, no matter what your profession is, make sure you're the best at that profession so you can move up to the next level. The second thing is, I've said it already a couple of times, be positive, not negative. Enjoy life. Take care of your family. Stay focused in your responsibilities and stay in your lane of responsibilities. And then the last thing I tell you, get that education, get certified, and make sure you plan for the future.
Thank you, Sergeant Major. And thank you so much for joining us. It was amazing having you on our show. It was amazing talking to you, getting to know you a little bit better. I think that you're a piece of our Army history here who can still chat with us and still give the benefit of his wisdom to the NCO Corps, to our audience, and to the Army in general. And we really appreciate you taking the time to do that, to continue mentoring. I don't think that as a true Army leader you ever really stop doing that, and it looks like you're just still kicking, Sergeant Major. not doing much fishing, still a leader out there, and we appreciate you and thank you for everything you do for our veterans, for our nation in general.
Well, I tell you what, if for all the people that are listening or whatever, go to Your Next Mission on YouTube and hit subscribe and look at the shows, and then follow me on LinkedIn. I'd love to see you, chat with you, and if you got some issues or something you want me to ask, or just send it to me, and I'll answer the question as best as I can. Anyway.
We appreciate that, Sergeant Major. Make sure you give us the NCO Journal a shout out on that podcast as well.
Thank you again for joining us, Sergeant Major. And thank you to our audience. Stay tuned for more interesting guests and inspiring conversations right here at the NCO Journal. Submit your articles, get published. Don't forget to visit our webpage and follow us on social media. We'll see you next time on the Sergeant's Time Podcast.